Hey there, cat fans. Welcome to Meowster Podcast. I'm Rebecca Zish. That's Tim Black.
Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you, Tim?
I'm doing good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. This episode is going to go up on January 1st, 2017.
Yes.
On previous episodes, when we've done this year shift, I've gotten it wrong. Do you remember that?
Now that you mention it,
I have done that. It's been embarrassing, to say the least. I think I've done more embarrassing things on the podcast than that, but
yeah. You got it right this time.
So. Yes, I did. Well, I made a point of it. Yeah, but I'm excited today. We're going to continue on with the adventures of Anton and Cecil, literary cats.
Mm-hmm.
So Anton and Cecil are the stars of a trilogy of books for about like fourth graders, basically, but for everyone.
Yes.
For everyone.
For everyone.
These are some of my favorite books. I've read it
so
all,
good.
like in the last decade, definitely, if not forever. These are my favorite books.
Really good books.
Yeah. So the Anton and Cecil books are written by Lisa Martin and Valerie Martin, illustrated by Kelly Murphy. The first one we talked about, if you want to go back and listen to us talk about the first Anton and Cecil book, which is called Anton and Cecil Cats at Sea, which was published in 2014. And today we're going to talk about the second book in the Anton and Cecil series, Anton and Cecil Cats on Track. And just in December of 2016, the third book of the trilogy was published.
Yes.
Anton and Cecil Cats Aloft.
Yeah.
So
Part 3.
They go to sea, they go to land, and they go to the sky.
Wow.
It's very exciting.
It is.
So for those of you who didn't hear the first episode about Anton and Cecil and you have no idea what we're talking about right now, we'll give you a little bit of background, which is that Anton and Cecil are brother cats who are very different. Anton is little and gray and little
reserved. Yeah, compared to his brother, at least.
Cecil is boisterous and he's fluffy.
Yes.
And he's heavy. As several other characters in Cats on Track make note of his weight.
Right. It makes it sound like he's gained weight since the first book.
I think he has when they've gotten a little bit older.
Okay.
And maybe he's I don't know. Yeah, possibly. Cecil is black with a white paintbrush tail and white paws. Like we said, fluffy and energetic.
And adventurous.
And starving all the time.
All the time.
Always looking for food is Cecil.
Yes.
Yeah, and he'll eat almost anything. Yeah.
He'll try pretty much anything.
Yeah, he'll give it a shot because his tummy is growling.
Right.
Whereas Anton, if it's not fish, he'd rather go without.
Right. He's a little more finicky.
Yeah. He doesn't, as we learned in the first book, he doesn't like foods that have a lot of bones. He doesn't like food that crunches when he eats it. So let's talk about why we love these books so much. Because there are a lot of what we call middle grade fiction, books for kids from like 2nd to 6th grade that are about cats.
Okay.
Different cat stories.
Yeah.
They're not all Anton and Cecil. In fact, very few of them are.
Yeah.
So what I love about these books, and I think you agree, is these characters are more like actual cats. Their behavior and their thought process to me is what I really believe cats would be thinking and doing.
Yes.
When I've read other books about cats, I just don't get that impression.
Because these guys, they encounter humans. They cannot understand what humans are saying.
And it's some of the funniest stuff ever written when humans are talking to them.
Right. They're like, I don't know what he's trying to tell us. He's trying to tell us something. But
sometimes they get it right.
Sometimes, yeah.
And other times they just have no idea and they get it completely wrong.
Right.
Yeah, and to hilarious ends.
Right. But they encounter every other kind of animal and they speak animal language. They understand whatever other animal they.
Well, in Cats on Track, they really only encounter other mammals. There's one bird.
That's true. Yeah.
At the end. And so that makes a little sense to me. Like, oh, they can speak with other mammals.
Yeah.
And Cats at Sea, there was, Dave the Lizard, seagulls. Were there any other non-mammal animals?
Non-mammals?
Not that I remember.
Not that I can think of, no. I don't think they talk to any fish or anything.
No, I don't think they would ever talk to fish.
No.
Oh no, the whale. Do they talk to the whale in Cats at Sea?
They may have.
Or do they just hear it sing?
A whale is a mammal.
Oh, whale is a mammal. Oh, see, I do embarrassing things on this podcast. I was just talking to a kid today about orcas and whales, and I knew full well a few hours ago that whales were mammals. I get here with a microphone in front of me, and I say really dumb stuff.
No, it's not that dumb.
It's pretty dumb.
Well.
All right. So, yeah, but I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look at it again.
Yeah.
If they talk to the whale or not. But, and in any case, yeah, they can understand all other animals. Oh, but another thing I love is that all of the animals, their speech patterns are reflective of who they are.
Right.
So, they meet, or at least Cecil meets prairie dogs.
Right.
And the prairie dogs are kind of bananas.
Yeah.
So is the black-footed ferret that Anton meets in this book. What his name is, what's his name? Jojo?
That sounds
Jojo
right.
the ferret.
Yes. Yes.
and he's yes. He's like a courtly cowboy gentleman in his speech and manners.
Right. Yeah, that's what I really liked about this. The further they traveled west, the more Western the speech pattern got.
Yes.
Sure is shooting, somebody said.
And they really, Anton and Cecil, who are very Eastern.
Yes.
Were definitely confused.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but I loved especially when Cecil meets the bison. The bisons basically speak in one word at a time.
Yeah.
And very slowly.
Right.
And to confusing effect. Because Cecil at first doesn't understand even what they're saying to him. Yeah. Because they just pick like the verb in a sentence that they're going to say, and they just say that. Just one word.
Right.
And it can be taken in many different ways, as Cecil learns. But there are things when they're described, like there's a scene in the story. By the way, there will probably be spoilers here. If you want to read these books, and we recommend everyone read them. And read them. If you have kids, read them to your kids. If you're a teacher, you should, because Algonquin Young Readers website has teacher guides for you. So if you're a teacher, you should make these part of your curriculum if you can. If you're in a position where you can choose books for your kids, for your students, you should. There's so much to learn because these books are rooted in history. They are. Right. This is historical adventure fiction starring two beautifully drawn cat characters.
Yeah. And you can follow along. There's a map right at the beginning of the book. You can follow along the map. Just like in
Cats at Sea.
Yes, and you can see exactly where they go, where their stops are on the train.
Oh, I know. I got so excited when I was reading this book.
Yeah.
Because it tells you,
where they're stopping.
They go from Boston to Cleveland to Chicago to Omaha. Do they go to St. Louis? No, Omaha, then Cheyenne.
Yeah.
And this is actually the route of the Transcontinental Railroad that was being built from the mid-19th century to the late 19th century. This is what they're doing in this book. These are two cats from Halifax, Nova Scotia, who in the first book got on sailing ships. Right. And went out to the Atlantic Ocean. And if you've not read it, ladies and gentlemen, that's what happens. Fascinating. And there's actual historical things that happened in it. You can go back and listen to our podcast about it. And then in this story, they are because Anton makes a friend in the first book. His name is Hieronymus. He's a mouse. He's a very stately mouse. He's a braggart, as Cecil would want you to know. Right. And they get a message that Hieronymus has been imprisoned, basically, and he needs their help. And so he
lies imprisoned in an iron fortress guarded by a sharp-clawed dragon.
That's what they're told.
That's the message that comes through the mouse network.
That's right. The mouse. It's amazing.
Yes.
This idea of the mouse network. Yeah. And he's between the whale and the coyote.
Mm-hmm. That's all they've got to go on.
That's all they've got to go on. And from that, the mice tell them, you need to get on this ship that's leaving Halifax. They don't know. By the way, I love all of this. They don't know it's Halifax.
No.
They just live here at this dock.
Right.
They're cats.
Yes.
How would they know it's Halifax?
They wouldn't know.
No. They don't know anything about government and borders and
They know that you've got to get on this one particular boat, and when it docks, you get off, and then you have to get on a land ship.
You have to get on a land ship. That's what the mice tell them. And so they just do.
Yeah.
And it's because they have, Anton has a sense of duty and Cecil has a sense of adventure.
Yeah.
And between those two ideas and the fact that they also are strong believers in friendship and brotherhood.
Yeah.
And so they use their strengths together and say, sure, why not? Let's get on a sea ship.
Right.
And go to a land ship.
Whatever that is. They hadn't even seen one in Nova Scotia. They're like, there's some sort of land ship where this boat gets off.
We'll find it.
We don't know what that is. We'll have to figure out what it is and find one and get on it somehow.
And hopefully it'll be the right one.
And hopefully it'll be the right one and it'll take us where we need to go.
And luckily for Anton and Cecil at this point in history, there's just the one transcontinental railroad.
Right.
So as long as they get on it, and they're getting on it in Boston, so it can only go west.
Right.
So, and actually, if you go to algonquinyoungreaders.com, you can find author insight essay written by Lisa and Valerie Martin. And that is one of the things that they write about. They say, luckily for our cats, there was only one way they could go.
Right.
I mean, they really couldn't get it wrong.
Yeah.
But they had no idea how far they would have to go.
No, they have no concept of the size of the continent or whatever.
And they don't even realize that there's water on the other side of it.
Right. Right.
They're just as far as they know, it could go on forever.
Right. The closest, the farther west they go, they start hearing about there's an ocean on the other side. Where the train ends.
Yeah, and they know what an ocean is.
They do know what an ocean is. Yeah. But they're like, what? How can that be?
Yeah. Well, they're cats.
Right.
Okay. You had mentioned this to me before, and this is also something that I love, but we just said that the mice call the trains land ships.
Yes.
So as I went back through the book to take my notes for today, I wrote down everything.
Every animal and what they call it.
And what they call the train. Did you do that too?
I did that. I started with a simple list, but then I went through as because they kept finding more animals and more things to call it.
Yes.
And so I was writing them. That wasn't part of this list, but I have them all.
So let's go through this.
Okay.
So beginning with the mice call them land ships. Then there's a kitten in Boston who calls the train rolling death.
Yeah. Look out.
Well, it's a kitten. She's like, no.
No way.
It's terrifying.
Stay
rolling
away.
death.
Do not get on that. We meet a charming horse.
Ugh. The horse, also in Boston, calls the train horseless carts.
Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, because he draws a horse-pulled cart.
Yes. This thing pulls carts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But without horses.
It's a very logical horse.
So far, these are all logical names for things.
They are.
They meet a dog who calls the train the growler.
Yes.
Which makes sense because dogs growl. They meet an owl who calls the train a screecher, which makes sense because owls screech. Right? It's all so logical.
Everything is
to me.
Yeah.
Let's see. I also have, they meet some more mice who call them cloud riders.
Cloud riders.
And those
That's a very poetic word for it.
And they're the steam trains.
Right.
Yeah. And then the prairie dogs who call the train
Thundercloud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as they're going west, they're getting these more Western.
More Western, sort of a Western theme to the.
Yeah, Western imagery.
Yes.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Did you have more than that?
Yes, the bison actually had 3 different words for it.
Oh, wait, did I write? I might have written those down somewhere else, but go ahead. Yeah.
Pusher, crusher, and danger.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the bison stay far away.
yes, and we meet a lynx.
Oh, yeah.
Who calls it the Black Screamer.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, that's a great one. There's another horse that they meet further west that calls them smoke machines.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
They make smoke.
Mm-hmm. And I think that might be all I have. Hieronymus calls it a land ship.
Which is what the mice back east call them.
You're right.
Yeah. Right. So there's an interesting idea again. Like there's no reason why all of the animals across all of North America
would call it the same thing.
No, of course not.
Right. Yeah.
And yet I just feel like our authors are so much more in tune with the idea that animals would have their own cultures
right.
and their own language.
Yes. And they would call something based on their own experience. They would call it rolling death. That little kitten does not want to be anywhere near. That is a very scary thing.
I'm very tiny.
Yes.
And it's very big. Speaking of kittens, at the beginning of the book, we meet Anton and Cecil have there are now younger kittens in their family.
Mm-hmm.
So their mother has had another litter.
Yeah.
And there's a kitten in that litter named Clive.
Yes.
I am so afraid for Clive. He wants to be Cecil
he does.
So badly.
He looks up to Cecil a lot.
And Cecil is not safe. Cecil makes bad choices. And he's somehow just lucky.
Yes.
He's lucky that he's survived everything he's done. And he loves to brag about the things that he's done.
Right.
Throughout,
he romanticizes his tales of
adventure.
Yes.
And which is why Clive the kitten. And in fact, at the beginning of this book, I really thought that Clive was going to stow away with them.
Oh, yeah.
And try to go on the adventure.
Right.
And I was like, no. They can barely take care of themselves.
They've got enough on their plate, Clive.
They don't need a kitten following them around. Right? Can you imagine how much more danger there would have been with a kitten along?
Yes.
I was so relieved when they got to Boston and Clive wasn't there. I was really worried about it.
Yeah.
But going back to the idea that Cecil is always bragging about his adventures, throughout Cats on Track, he takes several opportunities in meeting all these other animals to tell a specific tale from Cats at Sea, which is when he leapt from one boat to another with was it a diamond?
Yes.
A diamond in a velvet pouch in his mouth. And he leapt and he grabbed onto a rope with his claws and swung across, swashbuckling style as a means of ingratiating himself to some pirates.
Right.
Like he needed to get back home.
Yeah.
And it wasn't going to happen on the ship he was on.
Right.
So he saw an opportunity and he took it. So dangerous.
Yeah.
Please, cats at home, don't try this. Cecil is a fictional cat.
Yes. Are you listening, Clive? Do not try this.
But he tells this story over and over again.
Yeah.
And until Hieronymus is Anton's friend, right?
Yes.
Hieronymus saved Anton's life in Cats at Sea. Cecil is not a fan of Hieronymus.
Or mice in general.
Or mice. Well, no, he's a fan of them as snacks.
Well, sure.
But
yeah.
Yeah. But specifically, he finds Hieronymus exhausting.
Right.
Because Hieronymus talks as much as Cecil does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cecil doesn't like that. Cecil wants to be the center of attention.
Exactly.
Hieronymus is always the center of attention when he's around.
Yeah.
He's quite a public speaker.
Mm-hmm.
So the one time Cecil does not tell his tale of leaping with the diamond in his mouth and all that kind of stuff is when Hieronymus has already been talking for so long. It's near the end of the book.
Yes.
But Hieronymus has been telling this beautiful cougar that they meet.
Yes.
His whole story.
Right.
And then Hieronymus says something about, well, that happened when we were on the boat. And the cougar says,
What?
"What? You mean you also traveled on the seas?" And Cecil just goes, ugh, we don't have time to talk about that right now. and normally Cecil would launch into his own tales of adventure, that he's just so exhausted by the idea of Hieronymus having spoken so much that he's like, oh, we can't even talk about that right now.
I can't even.
And that made me laugh so hard because because that is Cecil.
That is.
He's like, as long as I'm the center of attention, I'll talk all day. But if somebody else, no, don't have time for that. Where's the next meal?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but Cecil is willing to put up with Hieronymus, who he finds so tiresome, because he did save his brother's life.
Right.
And so they have this sense of duty to each other, which is a beautiful thing, and is really the central theme of the first book.
Yeah.
However, the theme of this book is a little different. So, do we want to get into that?
Sure.
Okay, because I don't think we need to like go chapter by chapter.
No, we don't need to go through the whole story or anything.
No. But we can talk about the story in terms of the major theme of the book is. Now, I had written it down a few different ways myself, but I'm going to go with the way that it is written in the author's notes that you can look up yourself online at Algonquin Young Readers. And Lisa and Valerie Martin state it as liberty versus captivity.
Oh, okay.
So I had written it down a few different ways in my notes. I'd written pets versus freedom.
Yeah.
Like I'd written a few different ways, but obviously as the authors, they got it down to its nugget.
They did.
Which is liberty versus captivity. And every animal that we meet in this story has faced that conundrum.
Yeah.
More interestingly, if you look back at Cats at Sea in the first book, every animal Anton and Cecil meet is free.
Yeah.
Is not under the burden of humans.
Right.
And it is only at those very infrequent moments that they find themselves under the burden of humans.
Right, where they are kind of shanghaied into being ship cats too.
Right. Yeah. So that does and that's how the book begins. Is Anton is compelled into service.
Yeah.
Right, on a ship as a mouser, which is a terrible choice. They should have picked any other cat on the dock. Anton's the worst possible choice for that job. And so that's the danger.
Right.
But it's very clear in Cats at Sea that they want to be free and they don't want to be with humans.
Yeah.
Cecil made a mistake. Like he thought early in the book that he liked going on the boats with the humans. And it turns out not to be the greatest thing. But so that theme is explored in Cats on Track because the theme of the West, right, of westward expansion of the U.S. is about bringing civilization to the wild, right?
Yeah.
So as the train moves east to west, it's bringing, towns have to be built at every stop, right? You're actually going through prairies and mountainscapes and
after
this kind of
having
stuff.
Gone through some big cities,
right? But I'm saying the train is so the train is over, right? So the train is overtaking the wild landscape, and so that whole theme of the train which has been in American literature, in all of the 20th century, is full of literature about civilization overtaking the wild, right? It's never been told from the point of view of two cats.
Right.
Okay. And so deeper than that is from an animal's point of view, civilization versus wild becomes this liberty versus captivity.
Yeah.
That all of these animals that they encounter have at some point had the opportunity to be wild.
Yes.
And are now being confronted with either humans coming into their landscape and having to negotiate that, or actually giving up their liberty to humans.
Right.
And Anton and Cecil are pretty fascinated by this, like every step of the way.
Yeah.
Really. And so whether it's because they're afraid of the train itself, like the train itself is terrifying.
Mhm.
It's rolling death, right? Or the 3 words the bison call it, right? Thunder.
Pusher, crusher, and danger.
Oh, pusher, crusher, and danger. Ah, see? So clearly the bison are like, no. Right? But we know now, like that, civilizing the wild in the Western plains of North America meant death to the bison.
Right. Yeah, they put this thing right through the middle of this area that they used to just run across back and forth all the time without having to worry about it. And now it's right there in their face, confronting them all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And where are the bison today?
Good question.
But that all has to do with coming in and taking over their landscape, taking over their homes.
Yeah.
And it started with just a few towns and a train until let's build up, entire states and governments and
just keep pushing the bison further and further away somewhere.
Right. Well, and here we live in Nevada, and that continues to happen to our wild horses.
Or horses, yeah.
Yeah. It's very sad.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought it might be interesting to go through the book by talking about the animals they encounter and what their relationship is with this freedom or liberty and captivity, right?
Yeah.
So the first animal that they meet who is confronted with this dichotomy is the horse in Boston.
Yeah.
And the first thing we learn about that is that that Anton asks him what his name is. And the horse says that his mother called him Solitaire and his master calls him Nutmeg.
Yeah.
So it's very clear right from the beginning that the horse understands that he has not two personalities, but two purposes in life.
2 modes of existence, kind of.
Yeah. That he's from a proud family of horses, but he also he sort of makes his living serving a human. Right. But he is tied up. He talks to Anton about wanting an apple.
Right.
And he can't get it for himself.
No.
Because he can't leave where he's been put by the human.
Yeah.
And yet he sees where his strengths lie, like what he has to offer Anton.
Right.
And he offers Anton his height.
Yeah. Lets him climb up on top of him to look for Cecil.
Yeah, Anton says to the horse that he's looking for his brother and he can't see him, and the horse just automatically realizes that he's taller than Anton.
Right. You can see over everybody's head.
Yeah, and Anton's actually quite taken with that.
He is. Yeah.
When he gets up high.
Right.
Yeah. He doesn't get to get up high.
No.
Very often. He's a dock cat.
Right. Yeah, but to be up high like that in that environment where there's so much activity and so many people and things going on all around.
Commerce. Yeah.
Yes.
Action and transportation and and people of all sizes.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting for Anton. But it's an interesting juxtaposition because the horse who is tied up and can't leave offers Anton an additional sense of freedom by being able to see even more and to be able to see the whole crowd and to take in all the activity. So that's very interesting to me. And that's the first time, like I said, that Cecil doesn't meet the horse, but Anton encounters an animal that is dealing with this issue of being both in a captive of a human.
Right.
But still feeling like he is in some way his own horse.
Right.
He knows what his mother called him. He knows that he had a different name.
Right. And it's not his job to help out this cat. He's his own horse in this sense. He's made this decision that he's going to help this cat. Yeah. With this little thing that he can help him with. Yeah.
It is, and I don't think I'm saying too much to say this, but the fact that this whole my mother called me solitaire, my master calls me nutmeg, and the use of the word master, and the time that this story takes place, I do not think I'm overstating it to say that this horse represents
could very well be
American slavery. I mean, he wouldn't. The use of the word master is very specific, and the idea that the enslaved peoples of this time in American history, and earlier, obviously, would have had just that situation where you're born to a mother and father who give you one name,
you get a new name.
The master decides what you're going to be called.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Also decides if you can have an apple or not.
That's true.
Yeah. So I had fun. I'm just gonna let you know I had fun that instead of going chapter by chapter in my notes, I actually broke up the story by adventures.
Oh, okay.
So, so that was actually Adventure 2, separated on the dock in Boston. Because they get separated after they get to Boston. Right. Because Cecil has already been making bad decisions. Cecil makes all his decisions. Well, he's a cat, and cats have they have their instincts.
Yeah.
And Cecil is overcome by his instinct for food. He is food driven.
Yes.
And just a curiosity that sometimes terrifies me when I'm reading the story. Cecil, stop it.
Yes.
Stay still. Stay with your brother.
Stay together.
Cecil's always like, "Oh, you'll catch up." And no, don't
I'm gonna
do
go
that.
find some.
Stop it. Stop it, Cecil. I want them to be safe and together.
That does not happen.
No, it's upsetting. It always works out in the end because it's a book for kids, but
of course,
it's very upsetting while it's happening.
Yeah. More than once during the reading of this book, I say, "Oh, here we go again."
Oh, I get very upset because I think maybe they won't find each other this time.
I know. Maybe the next book is going to be all about them trying to find each other.
When I read the first book, I did not know if they would ever find each other.
Right, I know.
I'm like, this seems impossible. They're out in boats in the ocean. How would they ever find each other?
Didn't know there would be sequels.
No.
Right.
I know.
So it was like, well, I guess this might end with them two different cats having different lives in different places now.
That would be sad.
Yeah.
But in this story, I had a little more faith that they would catch up with each other.
Right.
Because they're following the train tracks.
Right.
So when they do get separated, just keep going.
Stick with the tracks.
Don't get off the track.
Right.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
So adventure number 4 for me is riding the train for the first time.
Yes.
And when they ride the train for the first time, they meet a very nice human.
Yes, they do.
They call him the duck-billed man.
Right, because of his hat.
Because he has a porter's hat.
Right.
A train porter's hat. And he feeds, so they hide away.
In a boxcar.
But he sees them.
Yes.
And he brings them food and water
because
on their whole train trip.
They're terrible hiders.
Oh, poor Cecil. Cecil's very fluffy, and he has a big, long, fluffy paintbrush tail.
Remind you of anyone?
Yeah, he's a terrible hider.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he brings them food and water on that whole trip, and had it not been for the duck-billed man, they probably would have died.
They may have.
They had no access to food or water on that boxcar.
Because Duck-billed Man was bringing food and water for Willie as well.
Right. So there's a dog. And he's described as a smushed, snouted dog. So and there's a picture of him. I think he's supposed to be a pug or a Pekingese, maybe.
Oh, yeah, it looks kind of like a pug.
Yeah. But he's made the trip on the train back and forth the country
times.
5 times, he says. 5 times. So he's obviously the dog of a wealthy family that, goes back to their East Coast home.
Right.
and then back out west again. And he says he doesn't mind the trip. He doesn't mind the train. What he minds is the box he's in.
Yes.
And that is very interesting to me in terms of this whole issue, that he is fine with being the property of humans and going where they go, being at their whim, right? He just doesn't want to have to also be inside a carrier.
Right. Because that's a whole other level of
captivity.
Of captivity, yeah.
Yeah, and he never says, like, I want to ride in another part of the train with my humans.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be something he desires.
Yeah, it seems like he would be okay with just being in that car by himself or whatever without having to be in that cage.
Right.
But it's that cage.
It's that cage that he can't stand.
Yeah.
He says it's very hot in there and it's hard to turn around.
Right.
And if you think about how long that ride is, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Poor puppy.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable.
No.
It's not temperate.
It's noisy.
Right? Yeah. The noise he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind the train itself.
Yeah.
It's how when it's further confined into
That's
the cage
true.
is what he doesn't mind.
Right.
Is what he minds. So Anton and Cecil figure out how to open his cage.
They do.
And so he just hangs with them unless the duck-billed man is coming and then he jumps back inside the cage.
Yeah.
So he knows enough too that humans want him in that cage.
Right.
And he's okay to play by those rules.
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't want to have to stay in there.
Right. Yes, I have that little section highlighted here where they get that open.
Okay.
And Willie's very excited. He says, "You did it," he barked. "You did it. I'm free." He ran with abandon up one side of the car and down the other. "I love cats," he shouted. "Cats are great."
Yeah, he'd never really known any cats before.
Yeah.
But it's funny when he first realizes that Anton and Cecil are in the car with him, he says, "Well, there's been some mistake because this car is for dogs."
Right.
So you don't belong in here.
Right.
And they're kind of like, "Well, we're in here." He's like, it's not right.
Did somebody put you on here because you're not in a cage?
Yeah, you're not in a cage.
Definitely be in a
this
cage.
Car is for dogs. He's like very clear on the rules.
Yes.
But
I've done this. This is my 5th time. This is not my first train ride.
Right.
I know what's happening.
I know what's happening.
Right. I know how it works.
Just should be dogs.
Right.
Yeah. But he tells them a lot because he's traveled. He knows a ton about the country.
He does.
And he tells them all about animals that they'll encounter along the way, which is good for them. It gives them some insight into what they'll be finding. And he especially tells them about coyotes. And a lot of the animals that they encounter tell them about coyotes. And I think it's interesting. Coyotes, Cecil does encounter a coyote directly.
Mm-hmm.
Anton hears one when he's with the lynx. But the coyotes don't speak to them.
No.
And so they, to me, are the most wild of the wild animals.
Yeah.
And they are the animal that every animal appears to be afraid of.
Yeah. And the clue that we have is that Hieronymus is between a coyote and a whale. So they're like, "Oh my God.
He is in danger." Because when they hear about the coyotes and how dangerous they are,
like, "Oh my God.
We've got to get to him."
We can't not
He's in
go.
a cage being
Yes.
guarded by a claw-footed dragon.
There's a coyote there. We
is
know.
that a claw-footed dragon?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And there's a coyote nearby. My goodness.
We know about whales. We know what whales are. But this coyote business.
But then they meet all kinds of animals that don't know what whales are. So they're one up on them. They're like, "Oh no, whale we got."
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's true. These prairie animals don't know what a whale. What do they know about a whale?
Yeah. Yeah, which is why they're so interested to hear that there is an ocean if you keep going.
Right.
Because they're like, well, that's where the whale's going to be.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to have to get all, when I was reading the book, I'm thinking they're going to have to get all the way to San Francisco.
Right.
Before Hieronymus is in San Francisco, I was thinking.
But no.
No. Anyway, turns out to be something totally different.
Right.
But turns out to be more of a metaphorical whale.
Right. I'm glad they figured that out.
I know. I was pretty happy for them.
Yeah.
So they get to the end of the line of that train,
Mm-hmm.
and their next adventure, as I number them, Adventure 5,
Okay.
is riding on a train with people.
Yes.
And this is the first time in the story that Cecil is mistaken for a skunk.
Right.
Yes, because he's black and white and fluffy. And apparently the size of a skunk.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets mistaken for a skunk, he gets thrown off the train.
I was really scared about that.
I was too. So he literally gets picked up by a porter and just thrown out of the train. They didn't want to ride with the people, but they didn't have a choice.
Yeah, this was not a train that...
it didn't have boxcars like
right.
the one they'd gotten used to.
Yeah.
So they had to try to hide in amongst the luggage.
Mm-hmm.
But Cecil's butt and tail were hanging out. And a woman went, skunk!
Yeah.
It's funny, though, because Cecil's reaction to it was that he's shouting back at his brother, which sounded like this. Right?
What he's really saying is, meet me at the next stop.
Yeah,
I'll get there
off,
somehow.
Yeah. Get off at the next station, right? But we know that's not what it sounded like to people. But at the same time, he was thinking, boy, this really is an adventure. I'm being thrown off a train. Which is not what Anton would have been thinking at all.
Yes.
Anton would have been like, oh no, how will I ever find my brother again? But Cecil's like, this is exciting.
Off you go, Mr. Stowaway, back where you belong, said the captain.
Yep.
As he tossed him off the train.
Tossed him off the train.
Firmly and without hesitation.
Yeah.
In an arc through the air and over the tall prairie grass.
There he goes.
Yep.
Adventure 6, I call Cecil in the Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
And
that was quite an adventure.
This is where he meets the prairie dogs first. I'm sorry, the ferret's not named Jojo. It's the prairie dog that's named Jojo. The ferret's named Gotcha, which is a very Western name. So is Jojo, though.
That really is.
Yeah. So the prairie dogs, this is a very interesting exchange when he meets the prairie dogs. Because the prairie dogs think he's a baby cat. And he's like, I'm a grown-up cat. And he's like, actually, I'm quite a big cat, And it's the first time he learns that there are bigger cat species.
Yes.
And Cecil does, at least. Anton learns it from the ferret, but Cecil learns it from the prairie dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And he's fascinated to hear about this.
Right.
He also is very confused because the prairie dogs don't look like dogs. And he's met many, many dogs.
You don't look anything like any dog I've ever...
Yeah.
I rode on a train with a dog for days, and you do not.
No, but they'd certainly met other dogs.
Other breeds of dogs that look different than...
In Halifax.
Right.
Yeah. And then he finds out that the coyotes are a type of dog.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very confusing.
Yeah.
I like all these ideas. This goes back to the idea of like culture and language.
Mm-hmm.
And the further you get away from home, the more confusing the language is.
Right.
Yeah, I liked that a lot. But the prairie dogs, they have wonderful personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, prairie dogs have an incredible social system.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they live. And they take Cecil right in.
They do.
So
whereas the prairie dogs are very afraid of lynxes, the big cats, they welcome Cecil in.
Well, he explains that he's not going to eat them.
Yeah.
He's hungry, though.
He is.
But did they give him berries?
Yeah.
And he's just happy to eat anything.
Yeah. It's not quite cutting it, but if it's the only thing they got, then yeah.
He'll eat whatever they have. Yeah, the terrifying scene where the prairie dogs have him come down into their tunnel system to sleep for the night.
Yeah.
And the coyotes do come.
Mm-hmm.
That is very scary. But again, I was glad it was Cecil and not Anton who is faced with this.
Right.
And every animal they meet after this, where Cecil gets to tell his story of surviving his confrontation with the coyote, is so impressed.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't happen. You survived?
A coyote attack.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So just more fodder for Cecil's storytelling.
Right.
Really. But I'm glad he survived. But then the bison come, and we've talked a little bit about the bison already, but they have especially Western names. Their names are like Hank and Chuck and Dirk.
Yeah, Dirk, Chuck, and Hank.
I don't even have that written down.
Yeah.
Somehow I just remember that because the names are so, they just feel like cowboy names.
Mm-hmm.
And that the monosyllabic speaking that they do is also reminiscent of cowboys.
Right.
The way we imagine them in any case.
Mm-hmm.
But when the bison come, this is just one of these situations where the cats are written as cats. That even though Cecil knows where the prairie dog's tunnel system is, when the bison are coming, when they're charging through, the prairie dogs go down. Cecil goes up.
Yeah.
There's one tree in the whole landscape.
He goes up it.
And he goes up it.
Yeah.
And when he comes back down, they describe it so well that he comes down backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the way he has to come down.
But instead of just writing, Cecil came down the tree, it's just beautifully described. And so you know exactly what he's doing. And you understand his hesitation.
Right.
He's not quite ready to come down to the ground yet. He's not used to the bison. He's surprised that the prairie dogs have just gone back about their regular business.
Yeah.
He's like, but because the bison were right there. Right. Yeah, they could run at any time.
Yeah, they stampeded for a while and they stopped kind of right where they were.
Yeah.
Or like on the other side of the tracks or something.
Yeah. I think they're just right there.
Just right there.
Yeah. And all of this leads to the chapter 9, which is titled Wild Ride, where Cecil is encouraged by Jojo to approach the bison that they might have information for him. He said they run all over the place.
Yeah.
And they probably know something about the train tracks. They probably know how far away the next town is.
Yeah, because they have no idea.
No. The prairie dogs they
have
never
no idea.
And again, like I go back to this idea of civilization in the wild. The prairie dogs are a really interesting animal to be in the story because they have this society that they've created. Prairie dogs are well known for this. Prairie dogs and meerkats basically have the same sort of so maybe our listeners, if they don't know much about prairie dogs, they might know something about meerkats. Maybe you watch Meerkat Manor on Animal Planet, but they have exactly the same social system, which includes whole populations living together in like an underground manor, Meerkat Manor, right? But that has different rooms, and the rooms have different purposes. There's like sleeping rooms and bathrooms, basically, and
food storage,
social rooms and food storage, right? And like the tunnels that connect them, and these can go on for very broad spectrums underneath the ground. But it is their society, and there are mothers and fathers and children and babysitters and workers and builders. And so they're wild animals, but they have a social structure. Yeah. They have a community and government in place, basically.
Right.
So they're a really interesting animal to be part of this when we're looking at the difference between. So they're certainly not under the thumb of humans, but they have a social structure that humans can clearly identify and follow.
Right.
Anyway, so I thought that was an interesting addition instead of any other animal that Cecil could have met in the prairie, to meet the prairie dogs specifically.
Yeah.
And then to meet the bison, whose only sense of organization is the stampeding, which they don't even seem to understand.
Yeah. This is just what we do. We're bison and we do this.
Yeah. Because he asks them. They're like,
what's this about?
Yeah. Nobody seems to know. The prairie dogs don't. The prairie dogs know when it's gonna happen.
Right.
But they don't know why. And the bison don't know why. And Cecil is he's not as erudite as Hieronymus the Mouse.
Right.
But he is a talker. And he is funny.
Yes.
And he does not like talking to these bison. They don't speak.
Right. They're not very receptive. At least doesn't seem like it at first.
They're
not social animals.
No. And yet.
They are a herd.
Yeah.
They just run and eat.
Yeah. And that's all they want to do.
That's all they want to do.
And the train has made it so that they can't.
Yeah. That's made it more difficult for them.
Yeah. I would imagine bison trying to run over train tracks would be
a disaster.
Yeah. Really scary.
Well, and they have that, trains had that apparatus at the front. They called it a cow catcher or whatever to push livestock animals out of the way. And one of the bison called it a pusher.
Oh yeah, well you were saying that was one of the words they used for the train.
Yeah.
Ugh. It's terrible. Poor bison.
Chuck called it a pusher. Chuck the bison.
Chuck, Hank, and Dirk.
Yes.
Yeah, if they had guitars and a campfire and baked beans, they would have been cowboys.
Cowboys, for sure.
The bison also think that Cecil is a skunk.
Yes.
He's having trouble out there in the prairie.
That little white spot on his tail isn't doing him any favors.
When he first asks the bison for help, they just go skunk, and then one of them says stink. And he tries to explain that he is not a skunk, and they will not listen. He finally is able to prove to them that he is a cat, but only by scratching Dirk's back.
Right.
Dirk has an itchy back, and Cecil says, this is my chance.
I can help you with that.
Yes. And this is, if you don't mind, I found there's a passage here just after he's helped Dirk out by scratching his back. That I just thought was such a wonderful example of Cecil's personality.
Yeah.
I just think this captures him really, really well.
Yeah.
So he scratched Dirk's back, and Dirk, so it says, Dirk rolled up to standing and gazed at Cecil with newfound admiration. Cat, he said. Cecil nodded and shook some of the dust from his own fur. Cat, you got it. He waited for Dirk's appreciation to turn into an offer of help, but the bison continued to stare at him blankly, the hair of his beard tossing in the prairie wind. Cecil sighed. Well, this has been great fun, he said, standing to go, but I'll be taking my leave of you fine fellows now. It's like, well, this has been a waste of my time, man. I've got places to be, right? I just thought, he's like, and then later on, like a couple paragraphs later, because the bison just keeps saying to him, leave. And he's like, yeah, I'm going. Thanks. Thanks a lot. And Cecil, edging back a few paces, his plan to charm his way into a ride had gone nowhere. And now the bison were actually telling him to get out. I must be losing my touch, he thought glumly. It turns out that what they're trying to say to him is, we're going to leave.
Yeah. They're saying leave and go. And they're kind of, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he says, and then Dirk says, go. And Cecil thinks, he can't get rid of me soon enough. He's like, fine, I'm going. All right, I'm gone. This lack of communication. But Cecil can't be bothered. He's not going to stick around and try to convince them anymore. He did his best.
Yeah.
He's got places to be.
He's got to get going.
Yeah.
He's not sure how far it is.
Yeah. He's a little sarcastic when he thinks someone's dumb. He's just like, fine. I don't need you either, buddy. Yeah. And this goes on for like another page and a half. Right. This miscommunication. And it is so, so funny.
Dirk reached Cecil and loomed over him. Cat, he boomed. Yes, Cecil cringed in the creature's shadow. Go, Dirk rumbled. I'm trying to, said Cecil, exasperated.
He's like,
ride,
he's
said
like
Dirk.
This. He's like, I'm trying to. Right. You keep talking to me. I'm trying to leave.
Then Dirk says, ride. Oh, okay. I see what's happening.
Fine. But this goes on for
does go on for
2.5 or 3 pages of just Cecil keeps turning to go and the bison keep talking to him. He's like, yeah, okay, fine. I get it, buddy. Whatever.
Yeah.
Give you a break, man. Fine. Free back scratch, nothing in return. I get it. Yeah. But they actually do offer him a ride.
Yes, which is a good thing because it was like hundreds of miles.
Ugh. Yeah. And it's an incredible, incredible thing.
Yes.
Interspersed with this story is Anton's story with the black-footed ferret, which is also an exciting story.
Yeah.
This incredibly friendly ferret named Gotcha comes along and introduces himself to Anton, because Anton at this point has gotten off the train at the next town that they found, which I guess is Omaha.
Yeah.
So this ferret is an exceptional example of freedom for an animal. He is just, he's figured out that if he basically stays active at night, that he won't meet humans.
Right.
And ferrets are, I don't know that ferrets are nocturnal. I think they're actually diurnal, which means sunset and sunrise and sunset.
Okay.
But in this case, Gotcha has decided, the best way for me is just to stay away from humans, like not be around when they're around, and just stay away from their stuff. Like he doesn't go into the town. But he also has to deal with much larger animals. And specifically, this is when Anton meets the lynxes for the first time and learns about more danger, which is in the form of a snake, a rattlesnake.
Yes.
Gotcha and Anton actually rescue baby lynxes
from a rattlesnake.
Because Gotcha wants Anton to see. He's like,
you got to see these cats.
You got to see these cats. These are baby cats, and they're bigger than you. Yeah. And Anton was just really taken with it.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, it's like when I was a kitten. Look at them playing and drinking water, and then they have this opportunity because two of the baby lynxes get away from the rest of them. So it's much like Anton and Cecil getting themselves into trouble.
Yeah.
And he and Gotcha are able to rescue them from this rattlesnake. And then you see the real civilization in Gotcha, because when the baby lynxes, the lynx cubs go to head back because their mother is coming.
Yeah.
And they're afraid of the mother. Like, Gotcha's saying, we can watch the babies as long as the mother isn't here. But as soon as she comes back, we got to book it, right? But when the lynx cubs go to head back, he calls out after them, now you make sure that your mama understands that it be Mr. Gotcha and Mr. Anton that done saved you, right? And I just made that. I think that might actually be the quote, but
it's probably pretty close.
Yeah. Certainly in Western literature, we have this idea of Western hospitality and a Western sense of decorum. And that is certainly what Gotcha represents.
Yes.
Right? So even though he's not a part of the human community and in any way, and in fact, to this day, ferrets remain illegal to be pets in most Western most Western states. Not here in Nevada, but in California, you can't have them as pets. And they are honestly considered wild animals. So that's another interesting idea, that here is an animal that humans, even now in the 21st century, are still trying to domesticate and really can't.
Right.
But because he lives close to the town, because he's part of this community that's being, quote unquote, civilized by the incoming train, he has those manners.
Right. He's picked that up from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though he stays away from the humans, they're around enough that he can.
Yeah, he's gotten that idea, even though the lynx cubs don't know what he's saying.
Right.
They're like, okay, buddy, thanks for saving my life.
Because they're not coming down to the train station.
No.
Yeah.
No idea.
Right.
Yeah. They're also babies.
That's true, too.
Yeah. Speaking of babies, Miss Harriet has come to join us. She's laying on her back.
On your notes.
She's trying to, she's on my notes. I have no idea. I have no idea what to talk about now, Harriet. You want to help? No.
She wants to show off her belly.
She wants to be mic'd. Can we mic her again?
No, I don't have the mic handy.
In any case, while this is all going on with Gotcha and Anton, Cecil is riding on a bison, barreling toward them.
Right.
And he ends up getting... I don't know how else he would have gotten off the bison.
Right.
Because they were going fast.
Yes.
But right around the town, one of the bison trips and starts to go down. And he ends up getting thrown from the back of Dirk, who's carrying him.
Yeah.
And this leads to Adventure 8, which I call Cecil is Injured.
Yeah.
But he gets thrown. And it's scary and violent. And
it is.
Anton sees it and thinks, could that possibly be my brother? And he's shouting, Cecil, Cecil. And Anton thinks, oh, he's hurt.
Yes.
Oh, why did we come out to this crazy place, right? And it's not the first time they've had that thought,
right?
But it's really the first time that they're thinking, oh,
this was a mistake.
And we may not make it home again, But I love, this is really beautiful. Anton runs out to Cecil where he's landed and he says, what did you do? Anton said, bumping noses and passing a paw over Cecil's shoulder, right? And it's that kind of really sweet description that we get over and over again that reminds us these aren't just characters. Like, these are cats. These are real cats that behave the way our cats do.
Yeah.
And doing things by like bumping noses to say, hey, it's me.
Right.
Hi. I love you. I miss you.
Yes.
I'm so glad I found you again. And it's just then that a giant lynx comes running. It turns out her name is Katya. She is the sister of the mama lynx, the mother of the cubs
that they saved,
that Anton and Gotcha saved.
Yeah.
And she says, she saw that happening and she wants to return the favor. She wants to help save them because Anton helped save her nieces and nephews.
Yeah.
But I love this at the end of this chapter. This is page 169. So basically Katya is saying the way that I can help is that I can take you to these humans. There are humans who helped me once when I was injured.
Right.
And they'll help you too. The danger here is that you have to let them, which means you have to give yourself over to them.
Right.
And this is a Native American tribe, we find out. And Katya explains that they're travelers. They don't settle in one place. They move depending on the weather. So she says, I think they'll bind up Cecil's wound and stop you bleeding. Because Katya says it's not broken, but you've lost a lot of blood and you're going to need their help. And Cecil is, he's willing to soldier on. Like, he's walking on this extremely injured leg.
Yeah.
And even Katya thinks that he's incredibly brave. But she says at the end of this chapter, one rides in on a train, the other on a bison. You give cats a good name.
Yeah.
So if this lynx, that's probably 5 to 8 times bigger than them,
at least,
right?
Yeah,
is impressed
by
them
and
their bravery,
and
their commitment to each other, then she's going to help. So Cecil goes, and he lets, he lets them take him in.
They fix him up.
Yeah. It gives Anton an opportunity to learn more about the wild from Katya.
Right.
He learns about the great cat, which is important
that is
a little
important
later on. But they keep going back every morning to check and see if they see Cecil. And they see the people and they see the boy who
took him in.
Yeah. And
they were packing up, getting ready to go.
They're packing up and getting ready to go. And on page 176, there is an amazing description of what happens next. So Katya the lynx has spotted Cecil.
Yeah.
But she's anxious. And it goes like this. Anton whirled to find Cecil up on all 4 legs and walking without a limp next to the boy who had carried him away. He let out a cry of relief until he saw why Katya sounded concerned. Every few steps, Cecil stopped cold, digging into the dirt and twisting his body. Then he was dragged forward again, and Anton saw why. Clutched in the boy's hand was the end of a length of cord that trailed along his side, the other end tied around Cecil's neck. Anton couldn't believe it. Cecil had been captured by the boy. He was a pet.
Yeah.
This is equally as dangerous as the coyote.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They need to get him back.
They do.
So this is, and I think even more dangerous in their minds than being impressed into service or compelled into service by the ships in the first book, by the sailors. The ships aren't sentient beings, but by the sailors. And because at least when you've been taken in by the sailors, you're still kind of your own cat.
Right.
You're stuck on this ship, but, you're not.
Nobody's got a cord tied around
Nobody
your
has a
neck.
leash on you.
Right.
You're being asked to still
Nobody's dragging you around.
Work towards your wild instincts by hunting.
Yes.
And we will reward you for that.
Right.
Right. With food and fresh water and maybe a little affection, depending,
Right.
But having a cord around your neck, being leashed.
Yeah.
And being dragged.
Yeah.
Because he's digging his paws in. He's like, no, I don't want to go.
Right.
At least not this way.
Yeah.
I think Cecil probably thinks like, well, they were giving me, because they give him jerky to eat, and Cecil will eat anything.
Sure.
He even says it took a lot of chewing, but it was okay.
Right.
And,
But now they're packing up everything and they're moving on somewhere, and he doesn't know where they're going, and he's going to get separated from his brother again, and he just got reconnected with him.
I think in some ways, if he had not been reconnected with Anton and there were these people who were willing to help him.
Yeah.
And they just said, hey, Cat, we're going this way. He probably would have gone.
He may have. Yeah.
If it was his choice. But the idea that they're trying to drag him there.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, no, thank you.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
No.
Yeah. So they realize they're going to have to do something pretty extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And Katya actually goes and she scares the boy. She scares him into dropping the rope.
Yeah.
And
fortunately, that's all it took.
But another one of these situations where humans have no idea what they're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Cecil sees them and he says, oh, hey, guys, nice of you to show up. Just as sarcastic as ever all the time.
Yes.
And Anton says, are you okay? And I've been better, said Cecil, managing a grin despite the cord around his neck. Katya, please do something about this friend of yours. And so Katya says, I hate to frighten him.
Yeah.
And you hate to frighten him? Gasped Cecil. What about me? I'm tied up like a dog. And isn't that it, right?
Yes.
That they met Willie, who was in a cage. Mm-hmm. He's the only animal they've met who's in a cage.
Right.
And the only other kind of dog they've met is the coyote. So this extreme examples of what a dog can be.
Yeah.
Like just completely wild to the point of not communicating.
Right.
Right. Just salivating, just teeth and claws. Right. To being a prisoner who loves cats. Cats are great. Cats did my lock. But even to the point where Willie was still willing to get in the cage just to make humans think that he couldn't get out.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Katya scares the boy, but it really upsets her. And she actually calls out sorry back to the boy, which probably sounded like this. Roar. It was just as scary to say sorry as it is to try to scare him.
Well, Katya was in a weird position because those same people helped her out. They weren't stupid enough to try to put a cord around her neck.
Well, she's a lot bigger.
Of course. But yeah, so I mean she felt that she owed something to them.
Yeah. I mean when Cecil says like you hate to frighten him, what about me? I'm tied up like a dog. Yeah. Her response to that is, well, he saved you, remember?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but it still doesn't mean you get to put a cord around your neck. That's what Cecil's thinking.
Right.
Which is, again, why I think, like, maybe in a different situation and given the opportunity to make his own choice, Cecil might have gone with them.
Might have.
But still knowing, like, I'm living out in the wild and I can leave anytime I want to.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a great drawing of that scene in the book, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Kelly Murphy's illustrations are just so perfect.
Yeah.
And the moments that she chooses to illustrate.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she does more than there are in the book, but I think she chooses the right moments. Let me tell you, I mean, I see a lot of these books for kids this age.
Yeah.
For people who may not know, but beyond my cat behavior business, I work in a children's library and I see some illustrations in some of these books. I'm like, why is that illustration?
Really?
Why are we illustrating that moment? Yeah. And I never think that with Kelly Murphy's illustrations.
Yeah.
I always like, yes, that is what I wanted to see. And the way she draws Cecil digging his feet in, the tenseness of his muscles.
Yeah.
It just looks if you've ever put a leash on a cat who didn't want to be on a leash.
That's what it looks like.
That's what it looks like.
You know what was great about where that illustration shows up? You get to the page where that scene has just happened, and then you flip, and then it's right there. It's like, oh, that's what I'm so glad I get to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, in my book, it's all happening at the same time. You've got the Kindle.
I've got the Kindle version.
So he only sees one page at a time.
I only see one page at a time, so I did not see it.
The way it's laid out in the book is an actual...
Right along with it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So they're going to move on from here. There's actually a moment on page 180 that I thought was really beautiful too. It's Anton and Cecil, now they're reunited and it's nighttime. And they have a moment to reflect on, what's been going on. And they're doing that while they're stargazing.
Yeah.
And they notice that they see the same stars that they can see from Halifax.
Yes.
Which is astounding to them because they've come so far, right?
Right.
And they say, I can see Hunter's Claw from here and Twin Whiskers over there. And so, again, these are the names that the cats have made for the constellations that make sense in cat culture.
Sure.
But even if you were to meet domesticated, not that they're domesticated, but, small cats, right? In other parts of North America, they wouldn't necessarily call them this. So again, it was just, it's cultural language.
It's like different names for the train.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, but it's really beautiful that they're just sitting there and they're stargazing and they're enjoying each other's company, but also realizing,
the enormity of.
It's been crazy. At this point, they're telling Katya, where they're trying to get. They're trying to get to a place between a coyote and a whale.
Right.
Then she realizes, she doesn't know what a whale is.
Right.
And so they explain it to her. They explain the shape of it and everything. And that's when she says, so it looks something like that. And she points at a big mountain.
Yes.
Now, I didn't have a chance to do this research, but I imagine this is a real mountain.
I tried to look it up, too. I couldn't find anything. I mean, I didn't look very hard. Nothing leapt right out at me. But
it certainly has to be.
It has to be something for real. Yeah.
Because that's how they write these books.
Right.
When they give them the benefit of the doubt that this is a real thing.
Yeah.
Somewhere outside of Cheyenne.
Yes.
Which is where they're headed.
Yes.
Even though they don't know it yet.
They don't know it yet.
No, and they won't know it ever because they're cats and they don't read English and they don't have maps and they don't.
Even if someone on the train announces that we're pulling into Cheyenne Station, they don't understand human English.
So, yeah, I mean, their language is written in English for our convenience,
right?
For the reader's convenience.
Yes.
I don't think they really speak English.
No.
I say that all the time about cats.
No, they don't speak English.
They don't speak English. They don't know. So they're going to get ready to get back on the train and travel toward the mountain that looks like a whale.
Yeah.
Katya also tells them about the great cat, which we've already mentioned in this podcast, turns out to be a cougar. Or mountain lion, although I think those are the same thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And they're afraid of that. They're afraid of the idea that there's a cat that is so big that it scares even Katya.
Yeah, that's inconceivable.
Because she's already a big cat to them.
She's the biggest cat they've ever seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can't even imagine what this cat is going to be like if they see him. So they leave Katya and they get on the train headed towards Cheyenne. And while they're on the train, they have another thoughtful conversation. And it's about how humans are dangerous and their fear when they can't get away from humans.
Mm-hmm.
So Cecil tells Anton that the boy was kind to him, and helped him.
Mm-hmm.
And but then he wrapped the cord around my neck and I panicked. They were folding up their sails and packing up blankets. I thought they were going to take me away with them and you'd never find me. But I'd keep looking, Anton assured him. You know I would. I know. Cecil flexed his injured leg a few times, thinking about what it would be like to be a pet. I've been in lots of tight spots, but he paused. That boy had a cord around my neck. In the blink of an eye, I couldn't get away. I was more scared than I've ever been in my life. And then Anton reminds him that in the first book, there's a moment where they were sort of put up for sale. Mm-hmm. There were these sailors who just like put them in cages on a dock.
Yeah.
And so other sailors could buy them
right.
and impress them into service. You know, and Anton says, when we were in those cages, we couldn't get away then either. That was different. Cecil tried to think of how we were together. Together is different, Anton agreed. So at least when they are together, they feel like we can maybe get, we can work together to get away or right. something. Or if we have to be imprisoned, at least we have each other.
Right.
But I do think that's interesting, because Cecil goes on to talk about how he used to go out on the day ships, on the day fishing ships or boats rather, and enjoy himself with people. So on page 190, Cecil continues. He says, so I guess the danger is in not being able to leave.
Yeah.
We want to go wherever we want, whenever we want. To be free, Anton nodded. All cats are wild, like Katya said. And yet here we are, riding on one of their trains to reach our imprisoned mate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this central theme that we're dealing with is right here.
That's it.
And right after that, they have a moment where they have to figure out how to get off the train without people seeing them. And there have been moments, earlier in the story, like when the duck-billed man was bringing them food and water, and there were humans who knew
right.
that they were on the train. After this conversation, it becomes the most important thing that no humans see them at all when they get off this train.
Right. Well, they got lucky with the duck-billed man. The duck-billed man was not preventing them from leaving. It would seem like if the train stopped somewhere and if he wasn't trying to keep them.
Right.
So that element of the danger, where he says right there that's where the danger is in not being able to leave.
Well, in fact, there's a hilarious moment when they're on that train with Willie, and the duck-billed man has come and taken Willie. Mm. And then he's trying to tell Anton and Cecil, he's like, it's the end of the line, boys. We're not going anywhere from here. You got it. Yeah, it's time for you to go. And they don't know what he's saying.
They don't understand. They think he's yelling at us for some reason.
Yeah.
What did we do?
And they say he's flapping his arms. And Anton says, oh, he must be trying to warn us that there's birds out there. Well, we better stay right here. Because before they got on that train, there was the great horned owl who wanted to eat them.
Yes.
So they were like, oh, we'll stay right here. He's saying there's birds out there.
Which, by the way, I want to point out, they had a conversation with that owl, and they actually learned quite a lot from that owl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, of course they did. Owls are wise.
But also, learning from the owl was really Cecil's way of using his wits.
Yes.
To keep the owl from eating them.
Right.
Because Cecil figured out, the owl, whether he was wise or not, he thought he was really smart.
And had to prove himself.
Yes. So Cecil's like, as long as we keep asking him questions, he's going to keep talking.
Right.
So in that way, Cecil's sort of, ability to face
when he can talk
danger.
Himself out of a situation, he will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's willing to face danger because he knows that he's a good talker.
Yeah.
But when it's between him being a good talker and Hieronymus continuing to talk, he won't do it. He's just like, everyone should just stop talking right now. I don't want to listen to this mouse anymore.
Yes.
Well, they're about to find Hieronymus. And then, so before this point in the story, the only animal they'd seen in a cage was Willie.
Willie, yeah.
So they're about to see their good friend in a cage. Mm-hmm. And it is shocking to them.
Yeah.
And he's being imprisoned by the witch. The witch he's being imprisoned by is a little girl who is a witch. I do not like this little girl. No. So she's living out in Cheyenne in the township with, there is a moment where like a mother and father show up.
Yeah.
But she is just, okay. Did you ever watch Tiny Toons?
A little bit, not religiously.
Because there was a character in Tiny Toons. It was a little girl who always wanted to have pets and more pets.
Okay.
And she would like dress them up in clothes and like
Okay.
hold them too tight so they couldn't breathe. And,
Yeah.
and she was the villain of the piece.
Yes.
And that's what I think of with this little girl.
Yeah.
So she has Hieronymus. We learned that she got him because she just like picked him up. We just put him in a cage.
Spoiled little girl, and mom and dad didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah. And so it's funny because Anton and Cecil, when they first see her, they don't realize that she's the witch who's imprisoning their friend. And Cecil goes, I'll just go have a word with her. And he walks over and he rubs against her.
He's being cute kitty.
Well, he wants scratches.
Yes.
He wants pets and scratches. And it's funny because when she tries to pick him up, she goes like, "Oh, kitty, I want you," basically. She like grabs him and he's like, "Meow," and he, tears a hole in her dress and runs away.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Bad kitty," and he says, I can't remember exactly what he says to Anton, but he says something about like, "Oh, that was horrible."
Yeah.
And Anton's like, "Oh yeah, it was so horrible. All the petting was so horrible."
Plus yes, here it is. I didn't care for her anyway. That squeaky voice would drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bet, said Anton, smirking. Plus those horrible rubbing fingers. Who could stand it?
This is one of the few times Anton's ever sarcastic.
Right. But Cecil did learn from the scent on her fingers, from those rubbing fingers, that Cecil is in that house.
No, Hieronymus is in the house.
Yes, Hieronymus is in that house. Cecil is on the porch.
Well, he's not anymore. He made a run for it. They've got to figure out how to get into the house. And they choose the most convoluted way possible to try to get into the house. They go up on the roof and then I don't know what. But they're hearing this voice, a human-sounding voice.
Yeah.
When they're trying to get into the house. And it turns out that that's the voice of an African gray parrot.
Yes.
So this little girl has 2 pets at the moment. Who knows how many other pets she's had that have escaped or died or I don't know what. But she has an African gray parrot named Deo. Mm-hmm. And that is its actual name. Or it's named from Africa.
Right.
I forget what she calls it. But it's another situation where this is an animal with 2 different names because he actually was captured in Africa and put in a cage and put on a boat and sent to America, where he was then sold into slavery, basically. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but I will. That is the story.
Yes. Yes.
And so his name is Deo, D-A-Y-O, but she calls him something else. I
have it in here.
Gray, smoky. I don't know. Some not very inventive name because she's a little girl.
Right.
Oh, I found this part where Cecil goes up to her in the porch and she goes, "Ooh, kitty, you are a dirty one. Would you like a bath?" If Cecil had any idea what she was actually saying, he would have run right there.
Absolutely.
Right? But he doesn't know what people are saying.
No.
Yeah. Merlin. That's what she calls the bird. Merlin, which is a name that comes from an English tradition. It's not African at all.
No.
Yeah. No. Like he's magic because he can speak.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. It's a very interesting. So they open Hieronymus's cage when they get into the room.
Yeah.
Hieronymus is thrilled to see them.
Yes.
You can't believe they made it this far.
Right.
He's been in this cage and running in a wheel, which is not the kind of mouse he is.
No.
And he's excited to leave. Deo is confused that Hieronymus wants to leave.
Yeah.
He really doesn't understand it. And he says, everything's really fine. I talk and they give me a cracker. Mm-hmm. And, every time, like no fail, right? I talk, they give me a cracker. Everything's cool here. I get food and water and
it's comfortable.
The little girl is fine.
Yeah.
But he does decide, because they need to make a run for it, and And Deo realizes that he can help. And so he actually does leave with them initially.
Yeah.
And they make their great escape. But he decides to go back.
He does.
And it's a really interesting moment when he decides to go back. And what he tells them is he says he was never a prisoner because the window was always open.
Yeah.
He could have left any time. He was in a cage, but his cage wasn't locked. Or he had a cage, but he wasn't in it, right?
Right.
And the window was
they
open.
let him out. Yeah.
Yeah, he was allowed to fly inside the house, and he didn't leave. And when he's with Anton and Cecil and Hieronymus outside, he hears the little girl calling to him. And he responds to that name, the name that she gave him.
Right.
Not his own name. And he decides...
Merlin.
Yeah, he decides to go back. So that's the final example, I guess, that we're given of this difference between captivity and freedom, or captivity and liberty.
Mm-hmm. Well, the title of that chapter is Caged and Free.
Isn't that interesting?
That is.
A little later, they're talking, and Hieronymus actually says that because they still have to keep going. They can't just stay where they are. It's not safe. They need to find someplace else to go.
Right.
But Hieronymus actually says to them that being in the cage has made him lose his courage.
Yeah.
That, he hasn't been faced with adventure or challenges or choices even.
Yeah.
And
he's been running in that wheel.
Yeah.
That's it.
And I think that's an interesting notion. The idea of being a pet makes you weak, or being a pet takes away your wild instincts when you don't have to use them anymore.
Yeah, he doesn't have to find food for himself or anything.
Yeah. He doesn't have to face dangerous larger animals.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to hide from humans. He's just in a cage on a table.
Yeah.
I didn't like the idea that he was just in a cage on a table. I was like, do you get a blanket? That just seems so exposed. I mean, caged in, but exposed.
Yeah.
Something that goes over the cage, maybe? I don't know. I felt bad for him.
I know.
The final interaction they have with another animal is they do finally meet the big cat.
Yes.
And this, for me, was adventure number 10, Rescuing the Great Cat.
Mm-hmm.
So the book is 14 chapters. I broke it down to 10 adventures.
That's a lot.
A lot of adventures.
That's a lot of adventure to chapter. The adventure to chapter ratio is...
it's pretty high.
It is.
Yeah, it's an exciting book.
It is.
I don't know about you, but the first time I read it in a day.
It took me like 2 days, 2.5 days.
I started reading it, and I was just carrying it around with me. It's like, what happens next?
Yeah.
Are they going to find each other? Why does Cecil keep getting separated? I don't... Like, Anton, to me, never gets separated. Anton stays where he's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Cecil ends up somewhere else. That's how I see it every single time.
Yeah.
At least in this story.
Right.
In Cats at Sea, Anton is impressed into service and Cecil goes after him. So that's different.
That's
but in this story, Anton never gets off the rails. He's like, I'm on track. I'm a cat on track.
That's what I'm here to do.
I'm going in one direction. That's all I'm doing. And Cecil's like, I'll go this way. I'll go that way. I mean, part of it's not his fault. He gets thrown off that train.
He got tossed off, yeah.
But then he got hurt, and then he had to go with the people, and I know. Yeah. But anyway. So, they find the great cat. This is when Hieronymus gets to tell his long story. On page 234, Cecil says of Hieronymus, he says, he comes from a long line of know-it-alls. That's one of my favorite sentences in the whole book.
Yeah.
But the cougar's name is Montana.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it believes that she might be the biggest cat in the world.
Yeah.
Never seen a bigger cat. And is feared by all. And while that is impressive to the smaller animals, it's incredibly lonely.
Lonely for Montana, yes.
And Montana loves having them visit her. Him? I can't remember now.
I don't know.
And tell the stories.
Him.
him.
Yes.
So Montana wants them to tell him their stories.
Mm-hmm.
He can't leave where he is.
Right. He is in captivity, in a sense.
In a sense, the fact that the humans have made their way into his space have forced him to stay on this mountain.
Yeah.
If he comes down from the mountain, then he'll be in danger because they're afraid of him.
Right.
And, humans have weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't specifically spoken of by the animals, but that was my thought.
Sure.
Like, if he comes down from that mountain and scares the wrong human, he's just going to get shot.
Yeah. Well, he was rescued from a human's trap.
Well, that just, in this chapter.
Yeah.
Right. When they come across him, he's got his paw stuck in like a
snare of some kind. Yeah.
And we don't know if that trap was set for him.
Right.
But it's possible. If humans thought that he was, killing their livestock to eat, he could very well have set a trap for him.
Absolutely.
But that's not gotten into. But I really did understand, that Montana's feared by all, which means that Montana has to fear all.
Yeah.
And that it wasn't like that before the train came.
Exactly.
It wasn't like that before the people came.
Right.
He would have had a much more expansive territory to explore. But now he has to stay up on this mountain where people just talk about, not people, but other animals just talk about the great cat.
Yeah.
And he's seen as a symbol, but he doesn't have friends.
Right.
And there aren't even any other cougars.
No.
And that bothers me as well, because what happened to them? The people came in and now they're all gone.
Yeah.
Either dead or got chased off.
Probably.
And so now he's all alone.
He's the last one.
I found this incredibly sad.
Yeah.
Of course, it's Hieronymus who saves him. He chews through the rope.
Yeah.
Which is like isn't that a classic Aesop's fable?
Yeah. I'm like
the lion and the mouse or something like that?
If this animal has a thorn in his paw.
Right, that's what it is.
That's what I was. Yeah.
Yeah. Is it called The Mouse and the Lion, or The Lion
Something
and the Mouse?
like
or
that.
something
Yeah.
like that? Yeah. But I thought that immediately. I was like, of course the mouse is going to save him.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Hieronymus is a brave mouse. And that actually gives Hieronymus the ability to realize that he still is courageous.
Yeah.
And he still seeks adventure so that they can move on. When Hieronymus is telling his long story, there's an incredibly sad, poignant moment in the book. It's the only sentence where the authors are speaking directly to the reader.
Okay.
It comes on page 245, and it just breaks my heart. So Anton thought it was odd that such a powerful and solitary animal as Montana would be so fascinated by the story of a mouse's travels. But then it dawned on him. Solitary, that was the word. Alone up here on his mountain, Montana was free and never afraid. But there was no one to tell him a story, and that was sad.
Yeah.
And the next sentence is, imagine, dear reader, if there was no one to tell you a good story. And I love the idea that, me as an adult, I got to that moment and was really teary.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Anton is correct. I don't think that Montana is free and never afraid. I think he's free and never afraid as long as he stays exactly where he is, but he moved even slightly out of his cave and he got caught in a snare.
Right.
So how free? He's not free, and he's definitely afraid.
He's definitely afraid.
So from Anton's perspective, he seems that way,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not.
No.
And he's also lonely.
Yeah.
And for Lisa and Valerie Martin to choose this one moment in the story to address the reader directly. Like, you've come with us on this amazing adventure, and we've told you this tale of these cats and all the other animals that they've met.
Yeah.
And what if this book wasn't here for you?
Right. Yeah.
What if you're being read this story by a parent or a teacher, what if they weren't there for you?
It's such an important point. We've got to tear down this wall and bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't want you to miss it.
Yes.
We want you to know that books are important and stories are important.
Yes.
And sharing stories is important, sharing them with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was already teary about poor Montana because I was already getting all that. I was like, oh, this is sad.
Yeah.
It's wonderful that Montana has entertainment for one night.
Right. Yes, exactly.
How sad is it that now he'll be all alone again?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then just then, the authors say, imagine, dear reader, if there was no one to tell you a good story.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, man, that just hit me.
Mm-hmm.
I do want good stories.
Yeah.
I want them all the time. That's why I read so much.
Yeah.
Do you keep track of your reading, Tim? Do you use Goodreads or anything like that? I do use
Goodreads, yep.
I do too. Yeah, did it send you your 2016 snapshot of your reading?
No.
Oh, I get that email in December every year. I got it around December 15th this year. And as of December 15th, I had read 51 books this year.
Wow, that's a lot of books.
I know, and I wasn't done. It was only December 15th. I read at least 2 more since then.
Oh, boy.
I know. So I don't know what kind of setting I have on Goodreads that it sends me that email, but
I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, my point being, I particularly need a good story.
Yeah.
I need storytellers to tell me good stories. And I hope our listeners understand that, hopefully, not that I'm bragging, but hopefully they understand that if I read that much every year, that when I say,
this is a good book. Yes.
it is such a good book.
It's a really good book.
Yeah. So that really is the end of the theme that we've, and I hope that was a way that people could come with us on this journey and understand, obviously I have cats as pets.
Yeah.
I try to give them as much motivation and opportunity to use their wild instincts in the house by giving them things to quote unquote hunt and climb.
Right.
But they're not free.
No.
I mean, they could leave.
They could.
If they wanted to.
Yeah.
Sometimes Virgo runs out the front door and rolls around on his back on the front porch.
Yeah.
And then I scoop him up. So they could leave if they wanted to, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to.
No.
And they don't want to. No. I've seen Harriet look out through the open door when your apartment door is open. She looks out.
Yes.
But she's not going to go out there.
She's not going out there, no. I don't think so. She gets weirded out when somebody walks by.
Oh, yeah. She's always like, what's that going? Who's that person?
Guy?
I've never seen that guy before. What's he doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the theme is beautiful. I think it's a wonderful parallel to the theme of westward expansion, which we see in Western fiction about humans.
Yeah.
I think they did an amazing job saying, okay, we've taken these cats out to sea and explored themes of brotherhood and friendship and loyalty.
Yeah.
But, where will we take them next and why? What story do we want to tell? So it's not just an adventure story for kids. Because let me tell you, there are so many novels for kids that are just adventure for adventure's sake. They don't have anything else to say.
Yeah.
No deeper meaning. That's just not the case here.
Yeah.
So not only do they have, is there a theme to explore and symbolism to explore, but it's just so beautifully written.
It really is.
And even if we didn't have Kelly Murphy's beautiful illustrations, the description is just perfect. And anyone who's ever had any experience with cats, you've had them as pets or you've just watched them, watch them in videos, watch them on TV or whatever, you can picture every single thing that these 2 cats do.
Yeah.
Because the description is just so on point. I mean, how many times do you read these books and they describe something that Anton or Cecil is doing and you know exactly what that is, but I also think I could have never written it that concisely.
Right.
That beautifully.
Yeah.
Like that moment I just shared where they bumped noses and Anton rubbed his paw over Cecil's shoulder. If you have multiple cats in your home, you have seen them do that.
Yeah. And even
thousands of times.
Yes. And going into detail where you wouldn't necessarily need to go into detail.
Yeah.
Like Cecil coming down from the tree.
Yeah.
Tail first, the way that that's described, it's coming down just like a cat would.
Yeah.
Just like it could have just been Cecil got down from the tree.
And I've read plenty of books that would just say Cecil came down from the tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or just, there would be dialogue like Anton saying, "Are you okay, Cecil?" But to saying, "Are you okay?" as he bumped his nose and ran his paw over his shoulder.
Yeah.
You're like, well, that's two cats that are bonded to each other.
Right.
And so bonded to each other that they can find each other out in the middle of the American West.
Oh, my goodness.
In the mid to late 19th century. Now, the next book, we actually get a clue to what's going to happen in the next book. And even the last illustration shows us, but they see a hot air balloon off the coast of San Francisco.
Yes.
And it is, I don't want to think about these cats in the sky. I'm so scared for them.
I know.
To go up in the sky.
That's such a great picture, too.
But they are actually in the third book, which, like I said, was just released December 2016. So we were a little behind on getting to this book, but we intend to get to Cats Aloft, the third book, quicker this time.
Yeah.
It's going to take place at the World's Fair in Chicago. So we actually have a very specific time frame on this one.
Okay.
So we had Cats at Sea you could actually place in time because there was a couple of specific ship references. So you know what year that was. Cats on Track, it's harder to say exactly when it's happening.
Yeah.
Because the Transcontinental Railroad was, obviously it's finished.
Right.
So I guess you could probably place it at a certain time. But we are actually going to go to the World's Fair in Chicago for the
very exciting
one. So, yeah. Okay, so I'm excited to read the third installment, but I'm sad because it'll be the last one.
Yeah, well.
So I'm very conflicted right now. Like, I want to read it right away, but I also never want to read it, so I don't have to read the last book.
I know. It's a dilemma.
It is a dilemma.
It's quite a pickle.
I have had the joy, though, of recommending these books to many kids at my library.
Oh, yeah?
And when I've gotten to tell them that the third book is coming, it's very exciting. And I'll say, I'm excited, too. We're all excited.
Yay.
About Cats Aloft.
Very good.
So, I don't know. How do you feel, Tim?
It was a great book. I loved it, and I think anybody should read it.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how old you are.
No.
You should just sit down and read it in one sitting.
Yeah. I remember when we were reading the first one, and you're like, okay, so we're going to read this book, and then next week we'll record the podcast. I'm like, I don't know if I can finish a whole book in 1 week.
And how long did it take you to read it?
Like a day.
Yeah. It's so exciting. Yeah.
Do we really have to wait a week to record? Because I'm ready to talk about it right now. 10
adventures in 14 chapters in this book. That's a lot.
That's a lot of bang for the buck right there.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I got the idea to break it down that way, but
it works.
But it worked as I was taking my notes. Yeah. So I was like, oh yeah. Anyway, I just love it. That's all I have to say. I think they're writing beautiful literature, and I hope more people will find it. So
I hope so too.
There we go. That's all I got.
That's all I got too.
Okay, go play with your cats.
Go play with your cats.